Good morning, everybody. It is time for, and we are back with the Bishop Car Chronicles. Time for another segment and broadcast of renewing the mind and the body for a healthy living. And while the notifications are going out, we'd like to send a birthday shout outs to Rob Graves, to Elder Calandra Sumter, to Janice Stokes, and to Terrell Blackman. And if today is your birthday, I pray that your day is filled with many blessings, gifts, and love from all around, and that you enjoy as many of the sweet things as you desire. Just don't make yourself sick, all right? It is your day. Go out, celebrate it, live it up. You deserve it. It is time for you to enjoy all that this day has to offer and all that this life has to bring by way of blessings. And so I pray that you enjoy it the most, that you laugh and all of that wonderful stuff, because it is your day, all right? If this is your first time watching one of these broadcasts, I want you to know that they are to encourage you, to empower you, to educate you, to motivate you, to inspire you, and to uplift you, to move towards your destiny, operating in the purpose for which you've been created, using the gifts that are within you. I want to say thank you so very much for tuning into this broadcast. I appreciate and love all of you that are a part of the Back with the Bishop family. It means a great deal for you to share, to like, to comment, to interact and engage over here on this particular profile and page. And I just can't tell you thank you enough. I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. And so we are still in our When They See Us discussion. Today is going to be part 3 of the discussion, and I hope that by now you have at least started the first episode. For those of you that have Netflix, and if you have Amazon Prime, I believe it's called the Central Park 5. There was a PBS special that was done about it, and then I also realized that the Central Park jogger by the name of Trisha Miley has in her own book, I think that she released in 2003, called I Am the Central Park Jogger. And so I am in the process of obtaining that book so that I can be able to read her account. And of course, it is her story of the tragedy and then life after the tragedy, life before the tragedy and life after the tragedy, because the reports are that she does not recall anything from the attack because the attack was so brutal. And so I'm going to obtain that to be able to read and then learn her side of the story, because of course most of her side of the story is not released in the series When They See Us. Again, that was written and directed by Ava DuVernay, and it's on Netflix. And I will highly again recommend that you go and watch the 4-part series. And it really focuses on the story of the 5 young men that were arrested between the ages of 14, 15, and 16, and convicted and tried of the attack, and sent to prison for, again, a crime that they did not commit. And so today I'm going to talk about 3 things that I want to drop here real quick because my time is about up. First thing that I want to drop is the effect, again, on the family. When you look at, I believe this is maybe the third episode, this is the third part of the series. When you look at it, it shows the effects of those young men being locked in prison on the family. And one of the things that I realized and noticed was that um, there was a lot of heartache, a lot of depression, a lot of despair, of course, because the case was so high profile. It was so high profile. So it was all over the news, all over the media, all over the country. And so, people immediately learned about these boys and about their families. All right. So, whenever a person is locked in prison, not only is that person locked in prison, but their families are also locked, and their families are also affected by, especially once it hits the media, once it's big news, if you will. And so for them there in that community, when they lived in Harlem and working there, of course, it affected their jobs. And so many of them lost their jobs because, of course, their companies and employers were finding out that they were connected to this attack that happened to this woman. So going to work is not the same, y'all. Some of the things, the luxuries that you and I, some of us, we take for granted, being able to walk in the grocery store, or being able to go to the shopping mall, being able to work, just have a job. That was something that affected, I believe it was Antron McCrae's father. The police department and the police detectives, they found his record, and found out about even the job that he worked, because again, this is in the late 80s, so it was very difficult for men to find good paying jobs that actually have benefits. This is just in the 80s, y'all. This isn't like the 30s and the 40s, 50s, and 60s. This is just the 80s. Just now, 30 years ago. It's about 30 years ago. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but we are still living under the effects of it. It's still even today, even with a college degree, you can have multiple degrees and it is still difficult to find good paying jobs with benefits. All right. And so, of course, the economy has grown somewhat, but the economy is still under pressure. It is not in a place where it's easy to obtain gainful employment that's able to support your living as necessary. So anyway, they found out about his dad's job, and of course his dad ended up losing his job, of course, because he got sick. And once they found out that he got sick, he had to go on dialysis. Of course, he lost his job, and then that means he also lost the benefits. So again, all of this affect poverty, y'all, poverty, and that becomes one of the main reasons why some of these young men were in prison. And even some young men are still in prison today. Black men, brown men are still in prison today because of poverty. They don't have the resources, they don't have the money to afford sufficient and creditable, reputable, and sufficient attorneys to be able to represent them legally, being able to have the legal assistance that's necessary to help prove their case. And so that happened to them. But then it also happened to Yusuf Salam's, his mom. She lost her job because, again, employers don't want to be connected to, and some corporations, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of those companies, they pull out of ALEC. They don't want to be connected or associated with something high profile like that in a negative light, and to say, well, you're employing so and so. And again, whether they were proved to be innocent or guilty or not, employers don't want to be connected or associated with anything negative because they feel like it can hurt their business. So then what ends up happening is it puts people in poverty, y'all. It's like all connected. And if you are in poverty, you don't have the resources necessary to be able, again, to get legal aid, to be able to support yourself and any kids that you may have. So, it affects everybody. Just the one person that's being locked up, they're the target, the individual, the defendant, they become the target, but it affects everybody. It affects the employer, it affects the community, and that's why you have so many activists. That's why you have politicians, and you have clergy, and you have people in the community that stand up whenever there is an injustice, because again, they were not proved to be they were not proven to be guilty. What ended up happening, well, the jury gave the guilty verdict, but it comes out later, years later, that the true assailant, Matias Reyes, is the one. And this goes into my last couple of points that I'm going to make, but Matias Reyes is the one who actually was the assailant in the case with the Central Park jogger. He was the one that brutally attacked this lady, and of course, after being locked in prison for another attack that he had on another lady, again, goes to show that sometimes the police, they didn't do their job in this case. And this is just from the outside looking in. They didn't do their job in this case. And I read a portion of, and pushing pause on Matias Reyes, because again, Matias Reyes connects to Corey Wise in a way that brings about the total twist in this whole experience that these people are having. And so I read in a portion of Trisha Miley's book, what she had released, and a portion of it is out on the internet. You can go and look it up. The report in this particular book, y'all, this is in the book. This is by people's admission. This is by people's admission. In cases like this, where you deal with attack, you deal with rape, you deal with homicide, most oftentimes, and this is something that I've learned, listen, watching Dateline, watching Forensic Files, watching Law and Order, watching Criminal Minds, most attackers are people that know their victims, all right, are people that live in the vicinity of their victims. And so in Trisha Miley's book, in her book, it talks about, and this is I'm going to prove the point, that the detectives did not do their job, and that seemed to have been some other motive for the detectives to get these individuals, these 5 black young men, black and brown young men. In Trisha Miley's book, it says that Trisha Miley, the day that she was attacked, is that she was supposed to meet one of her coworkers that night to work on some type of device. I think that she had to upgrade it or get it programmed or something to that effect. But one of her male coworkers was supposed to meet her that night. All right, that she was attacked. Okay, that's number one. Watch this. That's number one. And so the report goes, or in the book, is that the male coworker was supposed to see her after her run. She was going to go on her run, go home, shower, and then meet with him, which was going to be around about 10 o'clock p.m. Well, at 10 o'clock p.m., he calls her and he's trying to, get access to her apartment or whatnot, and he's not able to reach her. He's knocking on the door, no response, no answer. So he calls her, goes to the voicemail. So he's thinking, well, maybe either she's in the shower or maybe she's fallen asleep. So he goes home. That's one person who had an appointment to meet with her, who was never ever brought up. Okay, let me go on. So then I believe it's the next day. The only way that she was found was because there were 2 Latino men who saw this body lying in the park, and it was so badly beaten that they thought it was a male. So they were the ones, 2 Latino men were the ones that called the police. And so then, of course, the police go. And they go and they find of course the body. So it's starting to come to light, starting to surface, about this attack that's happened and this body that's been found in the park. All right, but then also in this is in Trisha Miley's book, y'all. Her male co-worker that worked with her, that was supposed to have the appointment with her the night that she was attacked, went to work the next day and realized that she was not there. So then what he decided to do was check on or check with her ex-boyfriend. She had an ex-boyfriend. He contacts the ex-boyfriend. The ex-boyfriend says, nope, I haven't seen her. Don't know where she is, haven't talked to her, etc. There are at least 4 males, other grown men, that never come to light in this Central Park jogger story. Of course, they never interviewed the male coworker. They never interviewed the 2 Latino men that found her, because then the question would be, well, who found her? Okay, and why did you find her this way? Can you tell us, what happened the day and the time that you found her? What events, what sequences led up to you finding her? All right. None of these interviews ever happened. And you want to know why they didn't happen? Because they were focused on the 5 kids that they knew that they could pin this thing on. Because again, they had pressure from the chief and from the head of the sex crimes unit to resolve and close this case. So they focused on 5 young black and brown men. Okay. So, it's just amazing to me how they never looked and how they never went after these men or never interviewed them to figure out any other details that could have been connected to the case. Okay, so going on to the true assailant, Matias Reyes, who actually ends up in prison with Corey Wise, Corey Wise is one of the young men that they found guilty of this crime. He ends up in prison with Corey Wise. They end up having a fight. I forget which prison that they were in. They end up having a fight. Of course, Corey Wise didn't know anything about Matias Reyes, and then they both got sent off to different prisons, and then come around later, they end up at the same prison again at a later time. And this time, Matias Reyes knows who Corey Wise is. And so he bumps into Corey Wise, and then they have this conversation. And Matias Reyes never tells Corey while they're in prison that he is the one that committed the crime. But then Matias Reyes has some type of consciousness. He has some type of awareness that comes over him and realizes and recognizes that this man is serving time for something that he didn't even do, because I am the one that did it. And Matias Reyes comes forth and he tells this story. He speaks to the investigators. He speaks to the police, to the detectives, and lets them know. He confesses to the attack on Trisha Miley. And so once they take his confession and they review and they investigate, they take his DNA, take hair samples, all of this stuff, they match his DNA to the DNA that was found at the scene of the crime. And this is how the Central Park Five became the exonerated five, because Matthias Reyes, the true assailant, came forth and confessed to it, and they were able to be released from prison. Now, this is after, again, between 6 to 14 years of being in prison and being on probation and parole and labeled as a sex offender. This is 6 to 14 years later that these men are exonerated. So all of this time they spend in prison, they're locked in jail, away from their families, not able to go to prom, not able to go to high school, not able to graduate, none of these things because of something that they did not do, but because of horrible, crappy police work. I'm going to say that's what it was. Good morning, Martha. Thank you for tuning in. It's exactly what it is. But I would also like to consider this meeting that Matthias Reyes and Corey Wise has while they're in prison. I see it as divine intervention. Only God could orchestrate something like that. Only God could orchestrate them getting into a fight, being shipped to different prisons, coming back around to the same prison, coming back to being in the same prison and having this exchange in this conversation. And it is a testament to the strength. I honor and I salute all of those kids, as well as Kalief Browder, because they refuse to admit to something that they did not do. Of course, it is on record, it is on videotape that they did it, but those were coerced testimonies. It is not the truth. They stood their ground and said, we will not admit to this because we did not do it, only to come out later on the other side of this thing and to see that Corey Wise, some people were talking about him, there are pictures that are posted that he's taking with people now as a result of the world being able to see this series when they see us, and then realizing and recognizing the story and the horrible events and nightmares and the trauma that they have endured, but to see that he's able to smile, that he's able to love, and people are loving on him. It's a God. I see it as a God thing. You can see it as whatever you want to see it, but I see it as a God thing. There was divine intervention where they meet and there's a change of heart, and they are able to have now their stories told, and they're able to talk about the brutality that they suffered in the prison system, which y'all listen, it's still going on to this very day, which is why I think it's important for all of us to see this series and then figure out what's your part. How can you help change things and make things better? That's what it all boils down to. How can you change things and make things better where you are? That's going to eventually affect the world, because of course this series, it's trending around the world. It's not just trending here in the United States, because Netflix broadcasts in 90 countries around the world. Good morning, Annette. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's trending around the world and having an impact around the world, just like the Kalief Browder story. He has had an impact on this system here in the United States because he stood to say, I am not going to admit to something that I did not do. Even though they put pressure on him and they put him in solitary confinement, they drove him to psychosis, a place of being delusional, depression, to being suicidal. And he still said, I am not going to admit to doing something that I did not do. This is the justice system of the United States of America. It has been that way since the birth of this nation. When they took those people, I'm going to keep saying it, when they took those people from Africa and brought them over here to this country and forced them to work for them and forced them to become slaves, that same spirit of supremacy, of racism, of prejudice, of hatred, it is still very much alive and well in this country. It's still very much alive and well in this country. So what I want to encourage you all to do is to wake up and to realize and recognize that you and we must do something to enforce and affect change right where we are. So I've shared this, and I hope that you've been educated. I hope you've become empowered and encouraged to go and watch this series. I want you to be inspired, motivated, and uplifted. Listen, to operate in the purpose for which you've been created, because that's how it's done. You can't do anything other than be who you've been created to be and use the gifts that you have within you to be able to make a change and make a difference where we are. I love you all. I'm signing off by saying hello 2019. I'm going up, and so are you. And what's to come for you and for me, it's better than what's been. Mad love.